on week 4, the final week of our November Wellness Challenge, and we are doing gratitude through connections. So stay tuned and learn how our brains are actually keeping us from the things we think will make us the happiest. If you've ever not gone to an event or a hangout because you didn't know who was there, this challenge is for you. As we look at gratitude and connections, I want us to focus on the negative dynamic and that piece for attachment. And attachment comes up because it is a key part of multiple, over 13 feedback loops related to our connections and how we get thrown out of being present with our connections because of how our attachment is, whether we're fearing abandonment or fearing an obligation or both equally at the same time. How our gratitude is nowhere to be found when we're in that negative dynamic. So a real quick recap. Reactionary emotions create cognitive distortions, causing attachment to spur up, which drives our negative narrative. I am not of good value. I have no value, or this wouldn't have happened to me. Pulling up every past stressor we've ever had, creating a filter that now we're speaking to that stress and we are perceiving from that stress in a perceived reality of that invoicing, causing the perceived expectations and those physical manifestations of dysregulated emotions. We shut down, we get angry, we have temper fits, causing more reactionary emotions. And as all of this is happening, we're going to hit some key points. We're going to hit actually those universal constructs, that being seen and heard, feeling like we belong, the agency, the value, which will ultimately kick off, I'm not very safe. And what happens in this feedback loop with the attachment, some of the belonging and agency, value, all those universal constructs, our past experiences and perceived expectations will pull on our emotions, just to throw all the cycles in there. And what we see is a lot of narratives that start to come up of how, what's the point? It does not even matter. And as we get into this, we start to isolate. We think that people are going to reject us, so we want to push them away first. Or we feel like it's too much effort and we don't know how we're going to actually show up for that space. And so it just feels like it's too much. We don't know how we're going to be successful. It seems like that fear of success, fear of failure, self-sabotage, scarcity mindset comes up in that avoidant attachment. And we really start to dig deep into wanting to avoid, which means when we're avoiding people, we're actually isolating. And as we're isolating and avoiding those people, that despair that is growing from the despair gratitude spectrum that we talked about last week. And as that is growing, our helplessness and hopelessness is growing as well. And we are really deep in it. When we lose gratitude and connection, depression, isolation, helplessness, hopelessness, all of those major depressive symptoms are really showing up. And it's hard to feel like we're going to perceive that we are going to get out of this. And here's the deal. Happiness is happenstance. And so even though we are showing a lot of signs of depression, it doesn't mean that we are necessarily depressed, because happiness is happenstance. So when we're depressed, we're still in this happenstance, this state of experience where we are feeding a narrative of being isolated and alone and feeling as if nothing that we do will change those perceived expectations of what it is to connect with others. And that happiness is happenstance. I say it because it's not true joy. It's an experience and a perceived expectation that this is what will give you joy, but it's happenstance. So you're still in a negative dynamic. You just think that if you have these external validators, that you would be off of it, that you would be in a better place. But really what you're doing is you're just spiraling further. And that's okay, because we're going to learn next how to get off of that negative spiral. And as we know, there's over 2,000 feedback loops. And at this point, when attachment comes in and we're losing that sense of connection and community, we are pretty deep in the spirals. You can be certain that you're over 1,500 layers of weighted past all over you. It's really hard to see it. It's really hard to see past it. But remember the good news. You only have to neutralize one and you neutralize them all. There is hope. There is healing. And we do it by awareness, acceptance, action. When we get into those what ifs and if thens, then label it. Know that that's what we're doing. We're worried about what will happen. We're trying to predict the future, that if I make this move, then this move is going to happen. And we ground. We do our 5 senses. You know, that mind-body connection, that somatic therapy that I do with my clients. We retrain the limbic system. We find our valid data points. All of this is in my coaching session, so go check it out. Book a free consultation so you can learn how to get out of it. But it's about being grounded. It's about being present. It's about using that spectrum of gratitude, owning your space on it that we talked about last week. So make sure you're referencing that lesson. And then it's understanding that you're in the spiral and have value and capacity for where you are in that spiral. Start figuring out kind of how far are you in the spiral, where are your thoughts and feelings and behaviors, and then choose opposite action, cognitive reframe, or counter rational thought. Just one of three. One of three. It's easiest to do an opposite action. If you are isolating, get out and go meet somebody. Cognitive reframe is look at what those thoughts are. What are you holding on to that prevents you from getting out? Will it matter in a week, a month, 2 months, a year? If it's not going to be a major effect, then just find the courage, find the ability to make that opposite action, to get out and do it. And adding in the traveler's mindset, we want to look at curiosity and adventure through gratitude and connection. And so what we want to find is the bigger value to these experiences. As we get further and further in suffering and despair, we become more and more narrow-minded. Going back a couple months, we looked at the forest between the trees. We really couldn't see the whole forest because we were so focused on one tree. That is what's happening here. You're getting stuck in these mindsets of inability, lack of capacity, low value. And so as we get curious and build that traveler's perspective, what we're seeing is that there are a lot more opportunities than we give ourselves credit for. So whether there is a toxic work environment that says this is the only job that I can have, this is the only way I will survive, a friendship that seems to kind of be taking on other interests and not seeming to call you back or to find that connection with you. Find ways to gain your agency. Don't determine your value and capacity based on other people. Find it within, because you can't control their behaviors. You can only control your thoughts, your feelings, and your behaviors. And that's an important point to remember this month. Rounding out of the spirals, as we're learning and keeping connected to this idea of I can only control my thoughts, my feelings, my behaviors, connecting to that value and capacity. I want you to remember the good enough self. And the good enough self, and this is all in part 1 of the key steps to living a happier and healthier life, that life worth living, we actually pulled radical acceptance with an attachment theory of kind of the good enough mother, and we built the good enough self. And what all of that is understanding that we can't seek and be perfect. It is a futile event. And the more that we seek this sense of perfection, the less available we are to ourselves and others, the less genuine our connections are, the more distant and depressed and helpless we begin to feel. But when we can take on radical acceptance and we can live within the good enough self, then what we have is this beautiful flourishing, this opportunity for a growth mindset to see ourselves as understanding that everybody has their strengths and their weaknesses. And it's not about our weaknesses. It's about leaning in on our strengths. And you know I love the Jungian collective unconscious, which says we actually hold all of it. All the knowledge in the world is just kind of out there. And we get to choose and how we interact with it. We're actually pulling, whether it's from our past and living in the shadows, or we're pulling with our strength and living in the light. We're pulling from these archetypes. And when we can learn what archetype we're pulling from and how to suppress the shadows and really pull from all of the light and the good from a variety of the archetypes, not just the one that we have learned in our family roles, it will take us everywhere in life. And so that's what we're going to do this week. I want you to think about the key understandings of what connection is, how we're getting in these spirals, how we're grounding and getting out, really taking on this idea of the good enough self. Go to the worksheet in the article, fill it out. Remember, you don't have to do everything, but it's important for you to do one thing. And I'm looking forward to hearing just how many minutes you were able to accomplish. Were you able to grow? Are you still kind of finding and building your routine, which is 100% a micro step, so own it. But I'd love to know how you did this month. So go down, comment on it, and let's build this wellness community together.